A while ago, I made a video about my genetics. It was thoroughly interesting, though most of the comments were more about the fact that my shirt looked like I'd just been admitted into a hospital ward, rather than about my haplogroups, but, you know, I'm not gonna judge. We're always very intellectual on this channel. But the second largest number of comments came from people who were talking about my comments about how white I was. For the record, here's what I said about being, you know, translucent. British Irish. I mean, surprise, surprise, translucent white man with a ginger beard, born in the UK. British Irish is my biggest one. I am, well, I mean, of course I'm that European, but I am 99.6% European. Oh, okay, I can now look at my maternal line and my paternal line. This is really cool. It's not gonna be really cool, it's gonna be more white people. Oh my god, famous people. This is all I wanna know. Who else is House 6? Probably like Gwyneth Paltrow. Who else is really white? Gwyneth Paltrow. Some people took issue to this and left me the following comments. Please stop saying you're boring for being white. Europeans have a rich and diverse culture. You should be more proud of your ancestry. There's nothing wrong with being white. Don't listen to American propaganda. It's not going to be really cool, it's going to be more white people. Whites have no pride anymore. They want to be anything but white. Sad. I really enjoyed the Trump-esque construction of the last comment. Sad. For the record, I'm not ashamed of the hilariously low amount of melanin produced by my body. So look at me, I look like a generic Northern European, and my comments about the amount of whiteness in my lineage was more to do with the fact that it was all expected. Don't you think it would be more interesting if I found out that I had lineage that was something other than Viking invaders and the Irish? I think so. But all of this and all of those comments kind of got me thinking. Can you be proud of being white? In order to have this conversation, we really need to understand what race is. I'm not going to do it within this video because I think that it's already going to be quite long. I would recommend ContraPoint's recent foray into explaining what race is. Then we can come back and talk about whiteness, shall we? If we can agree that whiteness is a thing, I think we can also agree that the generic term white pride also conjures up some awkward images. In fact, let's Google that right now. White pride. I mean, it's been implied by some that white people can't have pride in Europe and North America because they are the majority. In those groups, pride is segmented into cultural significance. So, proud of being Irish through St. Patrick's Day, proud of being German through Oktoberfest, even though that's technically specifically a Bavarian tradition, proud of being Scottish by eating minced intestines in a sheep's stomach. You get the idea. I have an issue with this analogy somewhat because it kind of implies that black people, Asian people, First Peoples all have a cultural experience and cultural history that is kind of generic and based on their race, which just isn't true when you especially consider the cultural diversity of the 54 countries in Africa, the huge number of tribal traditions that existed in the Americas before colonialization, and like Asia is huge. I mean, if you look at like Japan and Indonesia, they have like no cultural overlap, but people are still gonna end up calling them Asian because... And I think this is where we end up with pride based on race for ethnic minorities in the West, because everybody else, all of the white people, have defined them as such, rather than by their culture, their nation, or their, you know, hobbies. This of course ends up getting exemplified by the slave trade.
Warning, warning, white man talking about slavery.
People were ripped from their diverse cultures in Africa, had their names changed, their languages banned, even as something as simple as having drums banned by these people who are uprooted from their homelands, so that they couldn't enjoy the music that they had played back home. All of that cultural identity and history was taken away from people who were slaves by slave owners, and then the white majority decided to just define these people by little more than the colour of their skin, and to justify the dehumanization of the slave class that existed. And this phenomenon gave people of colour and people of specific races shared identities because of that. That phenomenon where white people would have been forced together to identify as a shared group has historically never really happened. Has it happened based on one's religion? Yes, of course. By nation? Yes, of course. Even political persuasion. And that's why I don't think that white pride, really pride just based on how translucent I am, I don't think that that can really exist. But actually, this leads me onto my next question. Why do people want to be proud of being white? In 2014, Washington Post reported on data out of Harvard that showed that white Americans saw themselves as more discriminated against than their black compatriots, despite the fact that this objectively isn't the case when it comes to stuff like economic data and police interactions. But especially white working class people have seen their communities decimated in the past few decades. Mining towns, parts of the industrial north, the Rust Belt in the US have seen their industry collapse around them. There used to be pride in the hard, honest work of working class communities, and a unity and a brotherhood and a sisterhood in the group of people that you met down the pub for a pint at the union after work. With that sense of community going or gone, people are now looking for other things to be proud of. But so often they're told that they aren't allowed to be. In the UK, metropolitan liberal elites, like myself, have criticised people for flying the English flag of St. George, or for caring about whether or not a politician sings the national anthem. As an example, gun culture is constantly humiliated in the US, and people are told to check their privilege with reckless abandon without it ever really being explained to them what checking one's privilege actually means. The rise of identity politics, though I think it's a good thing for increasing awareness of minority issues, has all of a sudden kind of made white people aware of their race. I said earlier that white people haven't historically been aware of their race as something that qualifies them as part of the tribe, but now you have listicle media who have questions for white people, all of white people. And then you enter the alt-right who are like, why isn't there a White History Month? Rachel Liu, writing in the conservative website The Federalist, in fact goes as far to say that white people should never be made aware of their race because of the consequences. She writes, "Everyone is better off when whites don't think too much about their whiteness. It should be normal without being normative, and regular without being right. It's having a one-story house. It's writing in black pen. It's Times New Roman." I've always been more of a Calibri fan myself, but I get her point. She goes on to suggest that concepts like privilege theory have snapped the United States working class out of their slumber, and I would tend to agree with her, but coupled with the decline of their economy and community structures, you've ended up with a perfect storm of the majority gaining a tribal identity and a perception of a decline of their standing in the world. I am in two minds about this phenomenon. I believe that an awareness of identity and privilege politics has actually allowed me to be a better debater, and the concept in general has raised voices where they have needed to be raised, and allowed for, and can allow for, much better and well-rounded discussion where it is embraced properly. Unfortunately, we can only combat the problems caused by white identity politics through time and a shit ton of education. Do you think that we can afford to do that? Let me know what you think. These videos are made for discussion. Discuss in the comments or on Twitter. Love engaging in that swirling shit show of a website. It's great, Twitter. This video was brought to you by my patrons, Ian D, Laura K, Nicola G and Robert M. Thank you, all of you. If you think that there should be a space for people to be able to debate politics and identity issues. Please at least, you know, check out my Patreon, take a look, see what it's about. Consider becoming one, because I really want to create some fantastic spaces in the future, because I'm trying to make this more of a full-time gig for me. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? If you don't fancy supporting me on Patreon, then you can click on the subscribe orb. It's very circular, lovely, has my face in it. Also, this video is apparently one that you will enjoy. I mean, I don't know what video is going to be there, but YouTube says that you're more likely to click on it. Feel free to prove them wrong. Gross.